Now, AEW presents its Full Gear pay-per-view this coming Saturday from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, with a 7 o'clock start time for their Tailgate Brawl pre-show, 8 p.m. start time for the main card. They're doing a tag team match on the pre-show with Big Boom AJ of the Costco guys, teaming up with QT Marshall. Yes, they're on the same side now. They set this up on Ring of Honor television. They share a common enemy in the Don Callis family. They take on Trent Beretta and Rocky Romero. You know, keeping the Costco guys stuff to the pre-show is where it belongs. I can't believe the Costco guy stuff is still going on here, but you keep it to the pre-show, fine. It has no business being on the main card when they already have a ton of matches on their main card, so keep it on the pre-show, that's fine. If I'm AJ, I'd be watching some old Sting, Ric Flair, Horseman tapes to prepare myself for what's probably about to happen to him. Also, they've added a $200,000 tag team match. Boy, Tony Khan has a little too much money to throw around. $200,000 with the Acclaimed, who don't want to have anything to do with each other, but they're being forced back together slowly, week by week. The Bang Bang Gang, Big Bill and Brian Keith, and the Outrunners. Winner gets $200,000. It would be more entertaining to see the Outrunners win the fake money, but they don't do anything with the Outrunners. So it'll probably be Castor and Bowens winning the money. On the main card, they're going to crown the first ever AEW National Champion with a Casino Gauntlet match. I already talked about the national title last week, which is completely unnecessary. All we know so far is that Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, Ricochet, the Gates of Agony, and Jet Speed have all declared for the match. And without knowing who else is in the damn thing, it's hard to predict a new champion, but I'll toss one name out there and say that we get the return of Switchblade Jay White. Jay White walks out as the new national champion. I still think adding this title is completely unnecessary and dilutes their other belts. MVP's boys are in. He is not, but I do have some news on MVP. He spoke with the website adventuregamers.com, and he revealed that he just signed a contract extension with AEW, saying, I'll be with AEW for quite a while in my current capacity and hopefully beyond in a managerial capacity and to whatever extent possibly behind the scenes. But he talked about other stuff too. And in comparing Tony Khan to Paul Levesque and Vince McMahon, he said, it's very different because Tony Khan is a completely different human being with a completely different personality. He's just a nice guy and a good person. I've never had any kind of relationship with Triple H. Vince I was able to work with, and with Vince knows exactly what he wants, how he wants to do it, and if you can present something that is better, sometimes Vince will listen, but when Vince has a vision, that's it. You go with it. There's no second guessing it. Tony Khan is a lot more interactive, and he will take in a lot more ideas. He's more willing to be pliable when it comes to his vision and how he wants to present it and what he's willing to do or add or change it. He's just a nice guy. It's funny, like his energy level, he's always happy, and I've never seen him be mean to somebody. It's a much different environment where WWE was very corporate, very tight-laced, for some people even uncomfortable, and they're made to feel like they're walking on eggshells and people are scared of getting fired. That environment doesn't exist in AEW. It's way more relaxed. No one's walking on eggshells. The boss has time for everybody, and it's super fun, no stress. On Bret Hart and others who have criticized Paul Levesque, who he is no fan of, he's made that very clear. MVP was very blunt. He said, I've said before, I call him a coward and a liar. Let's put it like this. If you really want to, you can go to YouTube and you can look up the interviews of various wrestlers through the years of what their opinion is of the man. Interviews of guys that were his friends, what they had to say about the guy. I can think of more guys that dislike him than I can think of ones that do like him. And people say MVP's salty or he's bitter. Like, no, I have personal issues with the dude stemming from professional stuff, but just the things that he does, how he carries himself, I just don't have respect for the guy. The newer generation, they don't know that guy yet. So the ones that came up underneath him in NXT, they think he's brilliant. And a lot of them should for the hand that he's had in their career. But the guys that had to work with him back in the day will tell you a different story almost overwhelmingly. And so it's not just me saying it. It's Sports Illustrated saying it. It's the Bleacher Report. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of a different promo here. He said, so it's not just me saying it. There's guys who are way up the totem pole than me that are telling you that this guy's no bueno. I don't know where the heat stems from. I mean, it stems from the MVP side, at the very least, but what caused it, we don't know. He's never pointed, to my knowledge, he's never pointed to any one specific incident, although supposedly it may go back to when he was first on SmackDown years ago as a wrestler. So now we're going back to like the mid to late 2000s. So this is not just a recent thing, because he knew Triple H from the days, of him as an in-ring performer, when Triple H cared about Triple H and nothing else, right? Not the Papa H crap that people talk about now, which is creepy as hell, by the way, when people call him that. So I can't speak to his personal experiences with the man. Clearly something he said or the way he carried himself when dealing with him rubbed MVP the wrong way. And it gave him an impression of Triple H that really made him lose all respect for the man. The stories about Triple H have been out there for years, right? Going back over 20 years, about how self-absorbed he was, trying to protect his spot, making which, by the way, a lot of top guys have done in wrestling over the decades, but most, if not all, of those top guys did not have the power and position that Triple H found himself in WWE. Not all of them can be part of that inner circle and those production meetings and the way that Triple H was when he was still a performer. That's the big difference here. But he's very protective of his spot. He would make comments about guys behind their back that, may well have affected their career in some cases, depending on what he's saying in these meetings to a Vince McMahon or a Bruce Pritchard or a Pat Patterson or whoever would have had some level of power and influence at the time. Like, oh, hey, this guy doesn't have it, or hey, this guy did this, or hey, this guy did that, or he's too small. Whatever the comments were, that could have a profound effect on someone's career. Now, are we to believe that as he's gotten older and his priorities and his responsibilities have changed to where it's not all about him anymore, that he's a changed man, right? I'm not around him. I don't work for him. I can't say for sure. And also keep in mind that, Triple H almost died a few years ago. So that could change your worldview real quick. As a viewer, what I see on TV and what I see from all of the interviews and podcasts and TED Talks and whatever else this guy's been doing is that he still has a very, very healthy ego. And he likes to make things about himself. That hasn't changed. I don't think that part of Triple H has changed. And I joked about it when I saw him in the ring on Monday in Boston, the first person we saw on the show on what should have been a segment all about John Cena. He had to be there front and center, knowing the house was sold out, to make sure that he was involved when he really was not needed, right? Not when Raw was they already have a general manager on the show. Yet there he was, right? The credits at the end of the shows, which we never had before. All of a sudden, the last couple of years, now we do, to make sure that Paul Levesque is the first name that we see at the end of every show. WrestleMania in Vegas next year, when the first commercial dropped a few weeks ago, who was the first face that we saw in the ad? Paul Levesque. The signature that opens every show, he made sure to add his voice to it. So it's the first thing we hear on every show. Like, he is enjoying his new position. That much is clear. The ego is still there. Beyond that, when it comes to the way he treats people, MVP would know better than I would, but it is an interesting point that he makes about how different the perspective might be for someone coming up in that system in the last decade, let's say, who would have worked with him in NXT, and now on the main roster, they're working with him there too, as compared to the people who worked with him 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And they saw a very different side of Triple H. You look at Shawn Michaels. He's Mr. NXT right now, and people glow about it. Shawn Michaels. That wasn't the case 30 years ago. But how much of that was also him being hopped up on God knows what? He may have been an asshole anyway, but I'm sure that didn't help. And every now and then, a story will leak out about an interaction that someone had with him after he came back to the company and he became born again. That doesn't really paint him in the best light, right? Shane Helms had one of those stories many years ago. Dax Harwood, Stevie Richards. Just to remind you that the old Shawn Michaels is still there, like buried beneath the surface. But I bring him up because by and large, people are very complimentary of him today. and how much, he is a pleasure to work with and how great of a boss he is to work for, people can change. I'm not so sure that's the case with Triple H, but people can change. But back to Full Gear. In the first ever $1 million trios match, more money, Kenny Omega and Jurassic Express, they take on Josh Alexander and the Young Bucks. I'm going with Josh Alexander and the Young Bucks for the win. Mark Briscoe challenges Kyle Fletcher for the TNT Championship. No disqualification. And if Briscoe loses, he must join the Don Callis family. Because if there's one thing we need, actually two things. If there's two things we need in this company, it's more belts and more members of the Don Callis family. Mark Briscoe failed in his first attempt. I think he wins the title. Here we have a new TNT champion. Brody King and Bandito, they defend their AEW World Tag Team titles against the former champions FTR. Dax and Cash, I think they're taking the titles here to set up for the eventual return of Adam Copeland and the inevitable Cope and Christian tag team match. They've added the Bastard Pac against Darby Allin after Pac press slammed Darby through a flaming table in blood and guts. Still, with Darby and the Death Riders, we are continuing this. This should be a win for Darby. The reigning TBS champion, now Mercedes 13 belts after last night's House of Glory show, your new APAC Wrestling Women's Champion. Mercedes Moné is looking for title number 14 when she challenges Chris Statlander for the AEW Women's World Championship. A year ago at Full Gear, Moné beat Statlander to retain the TBS title. And then she beat her again at World's End. 2 great matches, but 2 losses for Statlander. She got a measure of revenge in Blood and Guts, where she put Mercedes through a table outside the cage with a Samoan drop, even though her team did go on to lose. This needs to be a Statlander win. I think it will be a Chris Statlander win, and she will retain her title. Not only because she has already lost twice to this woman, but because the story should be Mercedes cannot win the world championship. This is now her second bite at the apple. The one blemish on her record came against Toni Storm at All In. She didn't get the job done. That will be the result here as well. No matter how many belts she collects to make herself feel better, she cannot win the big one. And maybe 13 ends up being her unlucky number. So she fails again here, and then she starts to drop each one of those belts one by one until she is left with nothing. And then and only then does she finally win the world title. That's the story they tell with this. And that's the one that makes sense here, because to put your world title on someone only for her to then go out and start losing a bunch of different independent belts doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You have her do that first. Then you put the world championship on her. But before this match, Mercedes is wrestling Red Velvet in a title unification on Dynamite for the Ring of Honor Women's Television title. Mercedes has the interim title. Velvet's been out with an injury since June. She has the actual belt. I don't think this would count as number 14 because she already has the interim version. It would just go from interim to official. And Hangman Adam Page defends the AEW World Championship in a steel cage match against Samoa Joe. This is to keep Powerhouse Hobbs and Katsuyori Shibata out of the match. And we all know how well these cages work to prevent that from happening. By the way, we're also coming off 2 Blood and Guts matches. And now we're getting a standalone cage match, which is just ridiculous. Of course, Hangman is retaining. He is not losing the title. And I believe we get the return of MJF after the match is over. That's the big cliffhanger they go off the air with, which leads to him cashing in his Casino Gauntlet contract for a championship match at World's End. And at that point, I think you're looking at the brand new AEW World Champion. Now, it doesn't look like we're going to get the finals of the Women's Tag Team Title Tournament on this show. On Dynamite Wednesday, we have 2 quarterfinal round matches. It's Toni Storm and Mina Shirakawa taking on Riho and Alex Windsor. And then TJ takes on Megan Bayne and Marina Shafir. So just time-wise, I don't think there's any time left to do the finals on the pay-per-view. But that's coming up on Wednesday, which, by the way, is a 3-hour show. It is a combined Dynamite and Collision show.